Welcome to the deep dive. So if you're tuning in, you've likely shared with us or are interested in this really dense set of materials we're looking at today. And this time, it's all centered on, well, frankly, one of the most ambitious projects out there in the digital asset world, the SORA ecosystem being built by SORAMITSU. Our main source here is this super comprehensive guide. It's updated as of November 12, 2025, which is important. And look, it's not describing just another DBAP, not at all. It's really laying out a blueprint for like a whole global financial system. So our mission today isn't just to list tokens or talk market caps. No, we want to properly unpack SORAMITSU's vision, their plan to build a decentralized, interoperable, and community-run economy. It goes way beyond just DeFi. This is like full-stack economic thinking.
And that word economy, that's absolutely critical. When we look at these sources, you have to grasp the sheer scale they're aiming for. This isn't just about tweaking things. It's about fundamentally re-architecting global finance. SORAMITSU is trying to build a complete holistic economic system, and it's not happening in a vacuum. It's explicitly guided by some, well, established economic theories, though maybe not mainstream in crypto circles. Think Professor Richard Werner's ideas about local productive credit. What makes this so compelling, I think, is SORAMITSU's track record. They're not just theorists. They've actually built national-level digital infrastructure, like real-world stuff. And that experience, that capability, means SORAMITSU is positioned to tackle maybe the biggest challenge in finance right now, bridging that massive gap between closed permission systems, think CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and the truly open, permissionless blockchain world. That bridging capability, especially with the upcoming SORA v3 architecture, they talk about, well, that's the strategic core we really need to dissect today. It's kind of the linchpin.
Okay, yeah, let's definitely unpack that. Because if the aim is genuinely a new sort of supranational economic system, then the foundation has got to be incredibly solid, and it probably needs to look pretty different from your standard crypto project design. So where do we start? I guess with that core philosophy and this multi-token engine they've built.
Right, so the sources hammer this point home. SOR is an economic system, not just a blockchain network. That signals a really comprehensive design goal. But practically speaking, what functions is SORA trying to bring inside the protocol itself that, most other blockchains just completely leave out?
Well, the big ones are monetary policy and resource allocation. Think about the functions of it, a national economy, really. Most blockchains are just specialized ledgers. They might be fast or good at smart contracts, whatever. But SORA, it's designed right from the get-go to handle stable money creation, control the overall money supply, and, crucially, fund productive activities within its own system in a predictable way. And that's exactly where Professor Richard Werner's ideas come in. His work it basically argues for taking the power of credit creation, making money away from big centralized banks and giving it back to local communities. The SOR system, with things like its token bonding curve and the planned parliament governance, it's like they're trying to encode that vision, empowering communities, DAOs to issue credit, manage resources, aiming for a more equitable and sustainable global economy. It's fundamentally challenging the whole fractional reserve banking model, but doing it with decentralized code.
Okay, but if the goal is that radical, doesn't embedding a whole economic philosophy right into the core protocol make it way more complex? Could that actually put people off, compared to simpler systems like Bitcoin or even Ethereum with just one main token?
Yeah, that's definitely the big question mark, the critique, the risk, right? Complexity versus simplicity. But SORAMITSU's argument, or justification, seems to be this. One single token just can't do 5 different, often conflicting economic jobs at the same time. You can't expect one asset to be the perfect unit of account and the best store of value and the smoothest medium of exchange and the governance tool and the validator reward all at once. If you try to force all that onto one token, you inevitably get trade-offs. You end up sacrificing stability for utility, or maybe security gets compromised.
Okay. So the complexity of this multi-token engine isn't just complexity for its own sake. It's actually designed to get rid of those internal economic conflicts.
Precisely. That seems to be the thinking. They distribute these 5 key jobs across 5 interconnected tokens. So you have the SOR blockchain as the ledger itself. Then XOR, that's the core utility and governance token, but with an elastic supply. VAL handles the network security side. PSWAP is purely for liquidity incentives on their DEX. And then you have KUSD and the older TBCD providing stability. By giving each token a very specific job, they're trying to build a system that's more resilient, more macroeconomically sound, maybe. ##B. The key tokens and their roles.
Yeah, let's dive into those rules because how these tokens interact is, well, it's pretty intricate, kind of fascinating. So XOR, that's the main one, the central utility and governance token. If SOR is this economy, XOR is basically its currency. Use it for transaction fees, use it to participate in governance. But the absolute key thing, the defining feature we need to talk more about is its elastic supply. It's not fixed, it's not mined in the traditional sense. It's governed entirely by something called the token bonding curve, or TBC.
The supply expands or contracts based purely on demand interacting with that specific smart contract.
Okay, elastic supply. But if the supply can just keep expanding, what stops it from inflating into wordlessness? What creates like deflationary pressure on XOR?
Right, good question. The deflationary part is baked right into using the network. 50%, half of all transaction fees paid in XOR are automatically burned, just destroyed, gone forever. So every single time someone uses this SOR network, half the fee vanishes. This creates this constant downward pressure on the supply, working against the elastic issuance from the TBC. The more the network gets used, the faster XOR burns. So it's designed to ensure the supply is always being constrained, even while the TBC might be minting more to meet growing demand. It's this dynamic push and pull.
Interesting balance. Okay, next up is network security. That's VAL, right?
VAL, yeah. Strictly for validator rewards. Its only job is to incentivize the nodes that secure the SORA network. And like XOR, VL also has its own built-in deflationary kick. VL gets burned on every single transaction across the entire network. It's not just the XRR fee burn. A little bit of VL disappears with every block too. The actual reward system for validators is elastic, it adjusts, but the core point is that the token itself has deflationary pressure tied directly to network activity.
Okay, makes sense. Security needs its own incentive. Now, for the third piece, you need liquidity, right? For the whole ecosystem to actually work smoothly. That's where PSWAP comes in.
Exactly. PSWAP is laser focused. It's the reward token specifically for liquidity providers LPs on Polkaswap, which is SORA's main DEX. It's single purpose, attract and keep deep liquidity there. And its tokenomics are driven by a pretty powerful deflationary buyback and burn mechanism. How it works is 0.3% of all the trading fees generated on Polkaswap are automatically used to buy back PSWAP tokens from the market, and then those tokens are permanently burned. So you get this continuous cycle. Trading activity generates fees, fees buy back and destroy PSWAP, which should, in theory, support its value and incentivize LPs.
Right, that buyback and burn sounds strong. But what about the rewards themselves? How does the system give out PSWAP to LPs without just inflating it away over time? Is there a risk of infinite inflation just to keep liquidity?
They seem to have thought about that. The reward system is designed to taper off. It starts really high to bootstrap liquidity, get things going. Initially, 90% of the PSWAP tokens that are burned each day are reminted and given out as rewards to LPs. That's super aggressive, very front-loaded. But the sources are clear. This percentage, this 90%, it decreases linearly over 5 years. It gradually goes down until it settles at 35%. So you transition from this massive initial subsidy to a much lower, sustainable, long-term reward rate. That's pretty crucial for avoiding runaway inflation in the long run.
Okay, that makes sense. Front load the incentives. Finally, we need stability. And here we have two assets mentioned, the current standard, KUSD, and then this legacy one, TBCD.
Right. KUSD, or Kensetsu USD, is positioned as the go-to stable asset for SORA now. It's created through the Kensetsu platform. Think of Kensetsu as SORA's version of something like MakerDAO. It's an over-collateralized stablecoin system. You lock up collateral and you can borrow KUSD against it. It aims for a $1 peg using algorithms and that collateral backing. KUSD is definitely the one they're focusing on for the future economy. In fact, this is a really big point in the SORA V3 proposal. They want to start paying builders and developers in KUSD instead of XOR.
Oh, interesting. Why that shift?
Well, a couple of reasons. Paying devs in a stablecoin like KUSD gives them predictability for their costs, right? They know what they're getting. But maybe more importantly, it creates this constant, real productive demand for KUSD within the ecosystem. That demand helps reinforce the stablecoin's peg and makes its utility absolutely fundamental to SORA's growth, not just something users speculate on.
And TBCD,
yeah.
Older one. What's its status now? Is it just disappearing?
TBCD was the original stablecoin attempt, more algorithmic, managed by the TBC, actually. It was important early on as a reserve asset for funding things. But yeah, the ecosystem's moved on. The source material explicitly states that minting TBCD is suspended under the planned SRV3 tokenomics. So they're pivoting away from that model towards the over-collateralized KUSD. However, TBCD isn't totally gone. It's still active, you can trade it, and importantly, you can still use it as collateral inside the Kensetsu vaults to borrow KUSD. So it retains some function during this transition period. ###C, the token bonding curve. TBC.
Okay, let's spend some proper time on this token bonding curve, the TBC. If SORAMITSU really wants to internalize monetary policy, like you said, then the TBC is basically the protocol's central bank, right? How does it actually work differently from, say, a standard AM in like Uniswap or even a traditional stock exchange order book?
Yeah, it's fundamentally different, radically different maybe, because the TBC is designed to theoretically eliminate liquidity risk altogether. Think about a normal DX pool on Uniswap. Liquidity comes from outside LPs. If those LPs decide to pull their funds, the pool shrinks, maybe disappears, and prices go wild. Traditional finance, you have central banks managing money supply, often opaquely, making decisions behind closed doors. The TBC, though, it's a smart contract. It holds its own reserves, usually external assets like ETH or DAI in SORA's case. And this contract acts as the transparent, always-on counterparty for XOR. It is the market maker. This is the core mechanism governing XOR's elastic supply. If you want to buy XOR, you don't buy from another person. You sell your reserve asset, say ETH, directly to the TBC contract. The contract then mints brand new XOR for you right there on the spot at a price determined by a mathematical formula, the bonding curve itself. This action expands the XOR supply.
Okay, so buying mints XOR. What about selling? If I want to sell my XOR back,
you sell it back to the TBC contract. The contract instantly buys your XOR using the reserves it holds, like that ETH you sold it earlier. And here's the crucial part. It immediately burns the XOR you sold it. This contracts the supply and pushes the price down along that same mathematical curve. It's automatic, it's predictable, it's deterministic monetary policy written in code.
the sources keep saying this provides predictable, deep liquidity. But how does that TBC setup stop, like a bank run scenario? What if there's a huge panic and everyone tries to sell their XOR at once? Wouldn't that just drain all the reserves in the contract?
That's where the design of the curve and the reserve management comes in. Because the price of XOR is mathematically tied to how much reserve asset is in the contract, big buys or sells move the price along the curve in a very predictable, often exponential way. A huge sell-off would drastically lower the XOR price according to the formula, making further selling less attractive. More importantly, unlike a real bank where a run causes insolvency because the bank lent out most of its deposits, the TBC's reserves aren't lent out. They are held specifically and solely to manage this buy mint and sell burn mechanism. The contract is always, theoretically, liquid enough to buy back XOR at whatever the current price is on the curve. It's meant to be this self-balancing system, much more resistant to the kind of manipulation or sudden liquidity vacuums you see in fixed supply markets sometimes. Yeah, for anyone used to thinking about central banks, you can sort of picture the TBC as the protocol's open market operations desk. It's constantly buying and selling its own currency, XOR, but not to fiddle with interest rates like the Fed does. It does it purely to ensure there's always deep liquidity available and to manage the money supply transparently based on actual market demand flowing through that contract. That determinism, the fact that supply changes only because of transparent buys and sells on the TBC, that's really the bedrock of SORAMITSU's whole macroeconomic idea here.
All right, so we've got the internal engine figured out, kind of. Now, how does this RA economy actually connect to the rest of the world? That's where Polkaswap comes in. It's the main DX built on SORA, yeah, but the sources emphasize its big focus is interoperability, which makes sense, right? If you're building a supranational economy, it has to talk to other chains.
Absolutely. Polkaswap has to be more than just a place to swap SORA tokens. It needs to be a global gateway, and it mainly achieves this using something called Hotoshai bridges. These aren't just simple bridges. They're described as pretty sophisticated connectors. They allow assets to move, hopefully seamlessly, between SORA and other major, but technically very different, blockchains like Ethereum, Polkadot itself, and Kusama. This is super important because SORA is built on Substrate. That's the framework Polkadot uses, so it talks nicely within that ecosystem. But connecting reliably and ideally trustlessly to huge chains like Ethereum requires these specialized Hotoshai bridges. And Polkaswap does more than just basic bridging. It also focuses on liquidity aggregation. So when you go to make a swap, it doesn't just look at one liquidity pool on SORA. It's designed to look across multiple pools within SORA and across those Hotoshai bridge connections to assets on other chains, maybe even other external exchanges eventually. It uses smart routing to find you the best possible price for your trade, trying to minimize slippage, especially for those complex cross-chain swaps.
And then that exchange activity, those assets, they need to connect to the real world eventually. Which brings us back to the SORA Card integration. That seems vital for making any of this actually useful day to day.
Totally. The SORA card basically turns those digital assets, whether they originated on SORA, Ethereum, wherever, into something you can spend instantly, like fiat, anywhere that takes cards. That's the ultimate utility connection.
Okay, now this is where the sources suggest things get really interesting. This shows SORAMITSU isn't just building inwards. They're actively engineering ways to pull value from other massive crypto ecosystems. And the big example here is this project called TONSWAP, built on the open network, or TOO. There's a specific economic link being forged.
Yeah, the TONSWAP collaboration looks like a really smart strategic play. The open network, TON, I mean, it's growing incredibly fast, right? A lot of that is because it's tied so closely with Telegram. That gives it this massive potential user base right on their phones, ready for mobile-first DeFi. TONSWAP itself is a DEX built for that environment, using things like concentrated liquidity pools to be more capital efficient. But the absolute breakthrough, the real innovation here, is what they call the economic alignment mechanism. This isn't just about letting users swap TON assets on Polkaswap or vice versa. It's about sharing the actual economic activity. The sources state very clearly, 10% of all trading fees generated on TONSWAP are automatically allocated to buyback and burn SORA's XOR tokens. And this is apparently hard-coded into the smart contracts.
Whoa, hang on. So let me get this straight. Every time someone makes any trade on TONSWAP, maybe swapping Toncoin for some other tune-based token, completely within the TON ecosystem, a slice of that fee, 10%, automatically goes towards buying and destroying XOR on the SORA network.
That's exactly what the mechanism is designed to do. Think about the implications. It's huge. First, it creates the sustained, passive, on-chain demand for XOR. This demand isn't coming from people specifically wanting SORA stuff. It's coming from the trading volume of a totally separate, potentially massive, and fast-growing blockchain, TON. Second, it constantly reduces XOR's circulating supply through these automatic recurring burns. It injects deflationary pressure sourced entirely externally.
Yeah, I have to push back a bit here. How technically sound is that? Making sure 10% of fees from Chain A TON are reliably, automatically, deterministically sent over to Chain B SORA SEPSR to perform a buy and burn forever. Doesn't relying on that cross-chain communication introduce big security holes or maybe regulatory issues?
That is precisely the kind of advanced blockchain challenge SORAMITSU is tackling with their whole cross-chain architecture, especially with the ASE bridges and the upcoming Iroha 3 stuff we'll get into. The mechanism absolutely depends on rock-solid, secure cross-chain messaging and execution. It needs to work without anyone needing to manually intervene, ensuring that fee allocation is verified on both sides and executed automatically. The sources do mention, actually, that while this is operational, they're planning accounting and transparency improvements for it in future releases, which is good, because for this economic link to be fully trusted by both the TON and SORA communities, the movement of those funds across the bridges needs to be completely transparent and auditable. But if they pull it off reliably, it becomes a potential blueprint for how different decentralized networks could align economically. You're essentially capturing a fraction of the economic energy from another ecosystem and using it to perpetually support your own native currency. SORA's success becomes partly tied to TON's growth, and maybe TON benefits from the added utility, too. It's fascinating.
All right, let's circle back to internal stability for a moment. We mentioned Kensetsu earlier, SORA's platform for the KUSD stablecoin. It's not just about minting stable money. It's also a tool for funding the ecosystem's own growth in a sustainable way, right?
Exactly. Kensetsu is vital. No real economy can function just on volatile assets. So it works using these decentralized vaults, much like MakerDAO. Users can deposit various types of collateral, not just SORA tokens like XOR, VEL, PSWAP, and even the old TBCD, but also external assets bridged over, like ETH or DAI. Against that collateral, they can borrow KUSD. Typically, you have to over-collateralize significantly, like maybe deposit $150 worth of ETH to borrow $100 worth of KUSD. That excess collateral acts as a safety buffer against price swings and helps maintain the $1 peg.
But the really interesting part, you touched on this, is how the entire SORA network is structured to help defend that KUSD peg. Can you break down again how the network fees are allocated to support KUSD?
Yeah, this really shows how central KUSD is to their strategy. The stability of KUSD is actively subsidized by every single transaction happening on the SORA network. It's a deliberate design. A huge chunk, 19.5% of all SORA network transaction fees, is automatically set aside specifically for buying back KUSD from the market and burning it.
Wow, nearly a fifth of all network fees, just constantly buying and burning KUSD to support the peg. That's a massive commitment of network resources.
It really is. And it underlines just how important they view KUSD as the system's main stable asset. Just for context, remember the rest of the fees. 50% goes to VAL for security rewards, 20% is for burning XOR itself to constrain its supply, 10% for referral programs, and only a tiny 0.5% for managing the legacy TBCD. So yeah, the vast majority of the value the network generates through fees is explicitly channeled into reinforcing either network security via VOL or stablecoin stability via KUSD. And that commitment gets even stronger with that SORA v3 proposal we mentioned, the plan to pay developers in KUSD. By creating this constant high utility demand for KUSD from the very builders enhancing the ecosystem, they aim to create a non-volatile, sustainable funding loop. This reduces the kind of sell pressure you often see when projects pay developers in their own volatile governance tokens, which devs often have to sell immediately to cover costs.
Okay, so we've established SORAMITSU has this unique background actually building national-level digital finance systems. And that real-world experience directly feeds into where they're going next. SORA version 2, the current one, runs on Substrate. But the future, SORA v3, involves this huge architectural jump. They're moving towards an entirely new hub chain, which has the codename SORA Nexus. And this is where the integration of Hyperledger Iroha 3 comes in, which the sources describe as a really advanced new blockchain breakthrough.
Yes, this shift to Iroha 3 is absolutely pivotal. It's the core technical move enabling SORAMITSU's biggest strategic goal, that bridging of permission systems like CBDCs and decentralized systems. They realize that while Substrate is great, especially for connecting within the Polkadot world, if you want a truly global, enterprise-grade hub chain, something capable of securely interacting with national central banks and regulated digital assets, you need an architecture that's purpose-built for extreme stability, high performance, and verifiable compliance. And Iroha 3, which is an evolution from the earlier Iroha 2 prototypes, is designed to provide exactly that. The whole point is to create this independent hub chain that can inherently meet the very strict requirements of enterprises and regulators.
Okay, but why Iroha 3 specifically? What makes it better suited for this Nexus hub chain compared to, say, other enterprise blockchains or even highly performant layer 1s we see in the decentralized space? What are the key technical advantages?
Well, I think it boils down to maybe three main things: performance, modularity, and this concept of determinism. So first, performance and consensus. Iroha 3 uses an advanced type of consensus mechanism called Byzantine fault tolerance, BFT. The key thing about BFT is that it provides immediate guaranteed finality. Once a transaction is confirmed, it's final, period. This is absolutely critical for high-value financial stuff. Their older Iroha 2 already showed potential for really high speeds. The sources mentioned theoretical tests hitting 20,000 transactions per second, TPS, in the lab. Iroha 3 aims to build on that, providing the kind of scale needed for something like a national payment system.
Right, that speed and especially the instant finality that's non-negotiable for banks or governments.
Yeah.
They can't deal with waiting for blocks to be probably final like in Bitcoin.
Exactly. Second big advantage, modularity. Iroha 3 is built with a layered structure, a modular runtime, and an updated command system. What this means practically is that different parts of the blockchain can be customized for specific needs, especially regulatory ones. So you could potentially have a module that handles specific compliance checks required for, say, EU-regulated assets, and that module operates without messing with the core consensus layer running underneath. It allows for flexibility within a secure framework. And third, maybe the most critical feature for this enterprise bridging, determinism, achieved through something called Iroha Special Instructions, ISI.
Okay, that term keeps popping up, ISI, Iroha Special Instructions. Can you explain what those actually are? How are they different from regular smart contracts, like the ones written in Solidity on Ethereum? And why are they so essential for an environment that needs to connect to CBDCs?
Right. ISI are fundamentally different from the typical Turing-complete smart contracts we usually talk about. Turing-complete means a language can theoretically compute anything, which is powerful but also complex and sometimes unpredictable. ISI, on the other hand, are designed to be much more granular, deterministic commands. Think of them less like writing a complex program and more like issuing very precise, low-level instructions, like transfer exactly X amount of asset Y from account A to account B, but only if condition C is met. Why is this so crucial for compliance and regulated finance? Because the outcome of every single ISI command is strictly predictable, easily auditable, and perfectly repeatable. There's no ambiguity. In the world of banking and regulation, you simply cannot have the risk of unexpected side effects or complex interactions that can sometimes emerge from very intricate Turing-complete contracts. ISI provides that guarantee of predictable execution. That high level of predictability and auditability is an absolute must-have for national financial systems like CBDCs. They need perfect accountability. ISI provides the technical foundation for that kind of enterprise-grade stability and trust. #B. Enterprise-grade stability and real-world proof.
This sounds impressive technically, but like you said, Soramitsu isn't just working on theory here. They've actually used Iroha technology to build systems that are already running, handling real money at national scale. Let's talk about that real-world proof. Does it justify this big shift to Iroha 3 for the V3 architecture?
Yeah, the case studies are probably the strongest argument that this Iroha tech is ready for something like the SORA Nexus hub chain. The flagship example is definitely Cambodia's Bakong system. This isn't a pilot project, it's a live, functioning CBDC, a central bank digital currency running on Iroha technology right now. And it's handling serious volume, the sources say, over $300 million daily. It's a core piece of Cambodia's national payment infrastructure, and it's already integrating with banking systems in neighboring Thailand and Vietnam. That shows, pretty definitively, that Iroha can handle massive, real-time financial traffic and manage cross-border settlements while meeting regulatory requirements.
No, $300 million daily. Okay. And their work isn't just in Southeast Asia, is it?
No, absolutely not. They're also involved in the Solomon Islands Bokolo Cash pilot. This is about bringing modern digital currency infrastructure to Pacific Island nations, which often face unique challenges. And here's a key detail. Soramitsu is specifically building a bridge from this permissioned Bokolo Cash pilot system directly to the permissionless SORA platform. This is basically a live, working prototype of the whole hub chain concept, demonstrating how value could move between a compliant government-approved system and the open, decentralized SORA economy. And then there's also the work they did building infrastructure for Palau digital bonds, making it easier for the government there to issue and manage digital financial instruments. So you've got national payments, digital currency, government bonds, all using Iroha in real high-stakes situations.
Okay, so putting all that together, this extensive experience building Bakong, Bokolo Cash, the Palau bonds, what does that really mean for SORA V3 Nexus? I mean, they're not just picking some new, untested technology off the shelf. They're building on an architecture that's already been battle-tested at national scale.
Precisely. That's the core argument. All that experience directly feeds into how they're designing the Nexus hub chain. It proves, or at least strongly suggests, that the underlying Iroha technology can handle the scale, the security, and the compliance demands needed to successfully bring institutional players and even government systems into the fold. The SORA Nexus hub chain is envisioned as this neutral, high-performance meeting ground, a place where regulated finance and open, decentralized finance can interact securely and efficiently. The big picture vision is clear. Use this hub chain to enable smooth, lower-cost collaboration between, on one side, permission system CBDCs, tokenized assets under strict regulation, and on the other side, decentralized systems, public chains like TON, Polkadot, Ethereum. And the key enabler for the secure interaction across that divide is the deterministic logic of ISI, ensuring that even when interacting with the wild or decentralized world, the compliance and security needs of the enterprise side are always met. That capability, that bridge, is arguably Soramitsu's most valuable strategic asset. ###C, development and testing.
All right, so this is obviously a massive undertaking transitioning to V3 Nexus. For listeners who are following the project, where's all this development and testing actually happening?
Right. The main proving ground for all these new SORA V3 features is the Fujiwara testnet. It's named after an influential Japanese family, apparently. This testnet is where they're working out all the kinks. They're testing everything from the new high-speed BFT consensus mechanisms for Iroha 3 to how the new Parliament governance logic will work, how the bridges perform under stress, all of it. The core goals for V3 Nexus remain consistent. Get this unified hub chain operational, ensure it hits those high-performance targets, and transition governance towards a more modular SORA DIO structure. Now, the timeline. The sources mention a target launch window sometime in 2025. But they also emphasize very strongly that getting it right matters more than hitting an arbitrary date. Progress is gated by security audits, rigorous performance testing, and ensuring that cross-chain components are totally stable. You just can't afford to rush something designed to potentially interact with national financial systems. Security and reliability have to come first.
Okay, so if you're building an economic system this complex, especially one aiming to be supranational, its governance structure needs to be really robust. and probably avoid just letting the richest players call all the shots. Currently, SORA uses the governance system from Polkadot v1. Can you give us a quick refresher on how that basically works?
Yeah, the current system is relatively standard for the Polkadot ecosystem. It involves a council, which is an elected body, initiating proposals for changes or spending. These proposals then go to a public referendum. The voting power in these referenda is distributed based on holdings of both the main utility token, XOR, and the security token, VAL. The idea is to give both the economic participants, XOR holders, and the network security providers, VAL holders, a say, trying to align their incentives for the good of the network. #BB, the SORA Parliament, SORA v3 Nexus.
Right. But the vision for SORA v3 Nexus includes a major governance overhaul, moving to something called the SORA Parliament. This sounds way more complex. It's described as a hybrid DAO framework, drawing inspiration from ancient Athenian democracy. It seems like a pretty radical shift from simple token voting.
It absolutely is, and it's a deliberate attempt to tackle what many see as the biggest problem with most DAOs today: plutocracy. The tendency for governance to be completely dominated by a few massive token holders, or whales. The SORA Parliament idea is built on 3 specific principles borrowed from ancient democratic systems, specifically aimed at structurally decentralizing decision-making power. The first 2 principles are fairly straightforward concepts: isonomia, which means political equality for all citizens participating in the system, and asagoria, which is the right for all those citizens to speak up, propose ideas, and contribute to the discussion. But the third principle, the one that really aims to break plutocracy, is sortition.
Sortition. That's the idea of using randomness in governance, right? Like drawing lots. How exactly does SRA plan to use sortition to randomly pick people to make decisions? And how does that actually function as an anti-plutocracy feature in practice?
Exactly. Sortition introduces randomness to prevent those with the most tokens from automatically controlling every outcome. Instead of every single decision being a straightforward vote weighted purely by how many tokens you hold, certain key governance bodies within this parliament structure would be filled by citizens chosen randomly from a pool of eligible participants. The theory is that this makes it much harder for a small group of wealthy actors to coordinate and guarantee they win every important vote or control every committee. It dilutes concentrated power. Now, mechanically, to make sure people are serious about participating and aren't just bots, citizens would need to post XOR bonds to even become eligible for selection. This shows they have skin in the game, an economic stake in SORA's success. But the parliament itself, operating under this idea of supranational global governance, would then have the crucial role of allocating newly minted XOR, remember the elastic supply from the TBC, specifically to fund productive projects that benefit the ecosystem. This ties back directly to that core Werner-inspired idea of enabling productive credit creation.
Okay, but hang on. If key decisions are being made by people chosen randomly, how do you ensure competence or accountability? What stops a randomly chosen group from making terrible decisions? Are there checks and balances?
That's a critical question, and the answer seems to lie in the structure of the parliament. It's not just one single assembly chosen by lottery. The sources suggest it's a more complex, multi-bodied system with a separation of powers. So while random selection, sortition, might be used to populate certain bodies to ensure fairness and prevent capture, the actual process within those bodies would still likely involve debate, expert input, maybe a review by other bodies. It's about integrating random selection strategically to dilute power concentration, not to replace reasoned deliberation entirely. The design aims to balance the efficiency of voting with the fairness of random selection, using multiple tiers and checks.
Right, that makes more sense. It's not just pure random rule. And how does this complex multi-body governance idea actually get implemented and enforced on the technical level on Hyperledger Iroha 3?
This is where using Iroha 3 becomes really important again. The plan is for SORA v3 to encode this intricate governance logic directly using those Iroha special instructions, ISI, we talked about. Because ISI offers such deterministic granular control, it allows them to build a much more sophisticated and secure governance framework than might be possible with typical, more general-purpose smart contracts. Think about it. This deterministic ISI logic could allow for incredibly fine-grained proposal types. You could have separate, secure voting tracks for technical upgrades versus treasury allocations, for example. And maybe even more futuristic, the sources hint that this ISI structure could potentially allow for interoperability between different governance systems. Imagine, down the line, the SORA Parliament having a cryptographically secure way to verify and maybe even react to decisions made by, say, the DAO governing the TO network or Polkadot parachain. That's pretty advanced thinking. The sources also mention they might borrow some ideas from Polkadot's newer OpenGov model, which focuses on more inclusivity and allowing multiple proposals to run in parallel, but again, all built and secured using the modular deterministic ISI logic on the Nexus hub chain. The ultimate goal seems to be making SORA's governance as robust, predictable, and secure as well as the $300 million a day running through Cambodia's Bakong system.
Okay, we started off saying SORA isn't just another app. It's aimed to be a whole economic system. But all these complex parts, the TBC, the multi-token engine, TONSWAP links, Iroha 3, the parliaments, they have to eventually deliver something tangible for an actual user, right?
Yeah.
And that final connection, the bridge from this intricate decentralized economy back to everyday life, seems to be the SORA card.
Absolutely. The SORA card is designed to be the practical payoff. It aims to eliminate that annoying friction between holding crypto assets and actually being able to spend them easily. It lets users take various crypto assets they hold. The sources mention BTC, ETH, stable coins like USDC, even euros, and spend them instantly like normal cash anywhere cards are accepted globally. And the integration runs deep. Funding the card isn't some clunky manual process. It happens directly via Polkaswap. So the liquidity that people provide to the Polkaswap DADX becomes instantly available for real-world spending through the card. That creates a really important feedback loop, right? Card usage drives activity back to Polkaswap, which benefits LPs, which makes the card more useful.
Yeah, that direct link is key. But the big hurdle for these kinds of crypto to fiat cards is always regulation and compliance. How does the SORA card handle that minefield?
Their approach seems to be partnership with regulated entities. The card is issued in collaboration with EU-regulated financial technology providers. That's not a small thing. Being properly regulated allows the card to plug directly into traditional payment rails. It offers features like having its own SEPA IBAN, which means easy bank transfers within the Eurozone. This puts SORA in a pretty small group of crypto ecosystems that have managed to build a truly functional bridge between the DeFi world and everyday compliant finance. It makes decentralized assets spendable in a way that fits within the existing financial system. Of course, it still has to operate under necessary restrictions like not being available in certain blacklisted regions to comply with international regulations. But having this smooth, regulated off-ramp is kind of the final proof point. It shows that a complex, multi-token, uniquely governed, decentralized economy can, theoretically, interact safely and usefully with the traditional financial world. #BB. Conclusion summary.
Wow, okay. This has been a seriously deep dive into SORAMITSU's vision, this blueprint for potentially a new kind of global economy. Let's try and quickly synthesize the main breakthroughs or key ideas we've covered. We started with that unique foundation, the multi-token engine designed to separate economic functions and avoid conflicts. Remember XORR, the elastic utility token with a 50% fee burn, VL for security, also deflationary, PSWAP for liquidity with its own 0.3% trading fee buyback and burn, KUSD, the main over-collateralized stablecoin, heavily supported by 19.5% of network fees, and the phasing out of the older TBCD.
Then we looked at how SORA connects outwards and captures value, especially that TONSWAP economic alignment, that hard-coded mechanism where 10% of all trading fees on TONSWAP automatically go to buy and burn XOR. That's a really novel way to create external, ongoing demand for SORA's core asset.
And we spent a lot of time on the huge technological leap planned for SORA v3 Nexus, building it on this advanced blockchain tech, Hyperledger Iroha 3. This leverages SORAMITSU's proven experience with systems like Cambodia's Bakong CBDC, aiming for high speed, stability, and regulatory compatibility through those deterministic Iroha special instructions, ISI.
And finally, we explored the governance evolution towards the SORA Parliament. That ambitious plan to fight plutocracy using sortition, random selection alongside voting, all built using secure ISI logic to manage complex, perhaps even interoperable governance rules.
Yeah, putting it all together, the long-term vision seems consistent with what we said at the start. SORA v3 is being positioned as this platform that can enable seamless, compliant interaction between the regulated, permissioned financial world and the open, decentralized world, trying to build a kind of supranational economic framework that prioritizes productive finance and community-driven growth, #outrarl.
The scale of SORAMITSU's ambition here is just huge. It really shifts the conversation away from just building niche DeFi apps towards constructing foundational economic infrastructure, potentially capable of operating at a national or even global level and interacting with existing systems.
If SORA v3 Nexus actually achieves what it sets out to do, it could offer a really compelling model for how sovereign digital currencies and public decentralized networks might coexist and interact in the future.
Yeah, and that leads directly to maybe the core question that this whole deep dive leaves us with, something for you, the listener, to really think about, especially in the context of where digital finance is heading globally. Considering that Iroha technology, the foundation for SORA v3, is already proven and running in national systems like Bakong in Cambodia, how might the deterministic nature of those Iroha special instructions, the ISI, fundamentally change the power dynamics between government-issued digital currencies and truly public, decentralized blockchains like SORA Nexus? If the exact same, highly auditable, predictable code governs both a central bank's ledger and an open, community-run DAO, where does the real control, the real accountability actually lie in that future digital economy? Does the code itself become a new form of governance?
That is a very provocative thought. Definitely something to mull over as these different systems continue to evolve and potentially converge. Well, thank you for sharing these incredibly detailed sources with us and letting us take this deep dive. It's been fascinating. Before we sign off, we absolutely have to include the standard financial disclaimer that was present in the source material. Please remember, the information discussed here today is purely for educational and informational purposes. It is definitely not financial advice, investment advice, or trading advice. Cryptocurrencies and DeFi are highly volatile and involve significant risks. You should always conduct your own thorough research. Do your own research, DYOR, and always consult with a qualified professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Okay, that is all the time we have for this deep dive into SORA, SORAMITSU, and their blueprint for a decentralized economy. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.